Would I be the asshole if I kicked my boyfriend's sister out of our house? That question has haunted me for months, but after discovering the truth about stolen money and hidden lies, I realized this wasn't about being kind to family anymore. This became about whether I'd let myself be walked all over in my own home by people I trusted. My name is Mia, I'm 25 years old, and I learned the hardest way possible that sometimes helping others means destroying yourself in the process. 3 years ago, I met Caleb at a local gym in Denver. I was struggling with a weight machine, clearly doing something wrong, when this tall guy with kind blue eyes and an encouraging smile approached me. "Mind if I show you a safer way to do that?" he asked, not in a condescending way, but genuinely concerned. "I'd hate to see someone as determined as you get hurt." That was Caleb, always looking out for others, always putting family first, always the protector. Those qualities I fell in love with would eventually become the very things that nearly destroyed us. Our relationship bloomed naturally. Caleb was 27, worked in construction, and had this incredible ability to make me laugh even on my worst days. He was close with his family. His parents, Linda and Robert, lived about an hour away in a cozy suburban house they'd owned for decades. His younger sister, Zoe, was 18 and still living at home, finishing up her senior year of high school. She seemed sweet enough during the few times I met her at family gatherings, though she was always glued to her phone and gave off that typical teenage attitude that comes with thinking you know everything about the world. Caleb moved in with me about a year ago. I'd bought my house with cash after saving every penny from my marketing job for years, working overtime and living like a monk to achieve my dream of homeownership. It was a 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a beautiful backyard, hardwood floors, and most importantly, it was mine. Completely mine. The deed had only my name on it, the mortgage was non-existent, and I'd never felt more proud of an accomplishment. When Caleb moved in, we split household expenses, but he never contributed to the mortgage because, well, there wasn't one. It felt fair at the time. Life was good. We converted one of the spare bedrooms into a home gym, complete with a treadmill, weights, yoga mats, and a mirror wall that made the space feel twice as large. Caleb and I would work out together in the evenings, pushing each other to meet our fitness goals. The other spare bedroom became my home office, where I could take client calls and work on freelance projects that supplemented my income. Our 2 dogs, Buster and Luna, had free reign of the house and a doggy door that led to our fenced backyard. Everything felt perfect, stable, and secure. Then last Christmas happened, and everything changed overnight. I should have seen the warning signs when Caleb became unusually quiet during the weeks leading up to the holidays. He'd get phone calls from his parents that he'd taken another room, speaking in hushed tones that immediately stopped when I walked by. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd just say, "Family stuff, nothing to worry about," and change the subject. The truth came out on December 23rd during what was supposed to be a casual dinner at his parents' house. Linda and Robert seemed distracted throughout the meal, exchanging glances that clearly meant they were communicating something they didn't want to say out loud. Finally, over dessert, Robert cleared his throat and made an announcement that would derail my entire life. "We've decided to sell the house," he said, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that didn't match the gravity of what he was saying. "We're going on a 6-month cruise around Europe and the Mediterranean. We leave in January." Linda jumped in quickly. "It's something we've always dreamed of doing, and with Robert's retirement finally official, we figured now or never, right?" I smiled and congratulated them, genuinely happy they were pursuing their dreams. But then I noticed Zoe's face. She looked pale, almost sick, picking at her pie without taking a bite. "What about Zoe?" I asked, the question seeming obvious. "She's still got a semester left of high school." That's when the uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Robert and Linda looked at each other again, then at Caleb, then finally at me. "Well," Linda said slowly, "we were hoping, that is, Caleb mentioned that maybe she can stay with us until she graduates and heads to college." Caleb interrupted, his voice firm in a way that suggested this wasn't a request but a decision that had already been made. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Stay with us?" "Just temporarily," Caleb said quickly, reaching over to squeeze my hand. 6 months max. She'll be gone by August when she leaves for college. I looked around the table at 4 pairs of eyes all staring at me expectantly, as if my agreement was just a formality. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had consulted me about having an 18-year-old move into my house, my sanctuary, my gym, my peaceful life with Caleb and our dogs. "Can we talk about this privately?" I asked Caleb, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course," Linda said, standing up quickly. "You two take all the time you need. We'll just clear the dishes." Caleb and I stepped out onto the back porch, the December air biting at our faces. The moment the door closed behind us, I turned to him. "You can't just volunteer my house without asking me first," I said, trying to keep my voice low but firm. "She's family, Mia. She has nowhere else to go." "What about other relatives? Friends? School programs for students in transition?" Caleb shook his head. "You don't understand. She's been through a lot. Her boyfriend broke up with her last month, her best friend moved away, and now her parents are essentially abandoning her for 6 months. She needs stability. And I need to be consulted before you make decisions about my home." The look that crossed Caleb's face was one I'd never seen before, a mixture of disappointment and something that almost looked like contempt. "I thought you were more generous than this. I thought you cared about family." "I do care about family, but this is my house, Caleb. My space. My peace of mind." "Our space," he corrected. "I live there too." "But it's not your house," I said, and immediately regretted how harsh it sounded. We stood there in the cold for several more minutes, going in circles. Caleb argued that it was only 6 months, that Zoe was a good kid, that she wouldn't be any trouble. I argued that I barely knew her, that our routine would be completely disrupted, and that major decisions affecting our living situation needed to be made together. Eventually, we went back inside, where the family was pretending to clean dishes while obviously listening to our conversation through the thin walls. The expectant looks on their faces made it clear that refusing wasn't really an option if I wanted to maintain peace in this relationship. "Okay," I said finally, the word feeling like swallowing glass. 6 months. Until college. The relief on everyone's faces was palpable, but I felt like I'd just signed away my freedom. Zoe moved in on February 1st, and from the very first day, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. She arrived with what looked like enough luggage for a year-long vacation, not a temporary 6-month stay. Suitcases, boxes, shopping bags full of clothes, and a collection of electronics that could stock a small Best Buy. Without asking, she immediately claimed the home gym as her bedroom, despite there being a perfectly good guest room upstairs. "I need the privacy," she explained when I questioned the choice. "And this room has better lighting for my Instagram photos." Within hours, my carefully organized home gym was destroyed. The treadmill got shoved against one wall, the weights were stacked in a corner, and the mirror wall became her backdrop for selfies. When I asked where Caleb and I were supposed to work out, she shrugged and said, "The garage?" "It's February in Denver," I pointed out. "The garage isn't heated." "Well, you could always join a gym," she suggested, not looking up from her phone. That night, I pulled Caleb aside. "She can't just take over the gym room. That's our space. She needs somewhere to sleep, Mia. We can work out at my buddy's gym for a few months. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. That gym represented years of saving money, research, and creating a space that was perfectly tailored to our needs. Now it was cluttered with a teenager's belongings and transformed into something unrecognizable. The problems started immediately and only got worse. Zoe treated my house like a hotel where she was the VIP guest and I was the unpaid staff. She'd leave dirty dishes everywhere except the dishwasher. She'd use my expensive shampoo and conditioner, claiming she'd forgotten to pack her own. She'd eat food I'd specifically bought for my meal prep, then complain that there was nothing good to eat in the house. But the real issues began when she started going out at night. The first time it happened was a Thursday. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of our dogs barking frantically and the front door slamming. I found Zoe stumbling through the living room, clearly intoxicated, bumping into furniture and laughing at nothing. "Sorry," she slurred when she saw me. "Didn't mean to wake the puppies." "Where have you been?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Out with friends." "God, you sound like my mom." The smell of alcohol was overwhelming, and she looked like she'd been at a party that had gotten out of hand. Her makeup was smeared, her clothes were disheveled, and she was swaying on her feet. "Are you okay? How did you get home?" "Uber," she said, then stumbled toward her makeshift bedroom. "Night, Mom." The next morning, when I mentioned the incident to Caleb, he brushed it off. "She's 18. She's allowed to go out with friends. Coming home drunk at 3 a.m. on a school night isn't exactly responsible behavior. She's practically graduated. Let her have some fun before college." I wanted to argue that it was my house and I should have some say in what kind of behavior was acceptable, but I was already walking on eggshells. Every time I brought up concerns about Zoe, Caleb acted like I was being unreasonable and unwelcoming. The late-night arrivals became a regular occurrence. 2 or 3 times a week, I'd be woken up by slamming doors, loud voices, and upset dogs. Sometimes she'd bring friends with her, and I'd wake up to find strangers sleeping on my couch or using my bathroom. When I complained, Zoe would act like I was being dramatic. "They're not strangers, they're my friends," she'd say. "And they're not bothering anyone." They're bothering me. This is my house. It's Caleb's house too, and he's fine with it. That became her standard response to everything, that Caleb was fine with whatever she wanted to do, so my objections didn't matter. The situation with my personal belongings got worse too. First, it was just borrowing shampoo and conditioner. Then I noticed my expensive face serums and moisturizers running out faster than they should. When I confronted her about it, she claimed she'd only used a little bit and offered to buy me new ones, but never did. Then clothes started disappearing. My favorite sweater, a pair of designer jeans I'd splurged on, a jacket that had been a gift from my mother. When I found Zoe wearing my sweater to school one day, I finally lost it. "That's mine," I said firmly. "Caleb said I could borrow it," she replied without missing a beat. When I asked Caleb about it later, he said he'd never given her permission to take my clothes, but somehow it became my fault for not communicating clearly that my belongings were off limits. "She's just a kid, Mia. She probably didn't realize it was a big deal. She's 18, not 8. And she knows exactly what she's doing." But every conversation ended the same way, with Caleb defending his sister and me feeling like the villain for not wanting to share everything I owned with someone who showed no respect for my property or my home. The final straw with the personal belongings came when I discovered that Zoe had somehow gotten copies of my house keys made. Not one copy, not 2 copies, but apparently 6 copies that she distributed to various friends, for convenience. I only found out because one of her friends showed up at my house at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday while Caleb and I were in bed, letting herself in with a key and acting surprised that we were home. "Oh, hey," the girl said, standing in my living room like she belonged there. "Zoe said she'd be here." "Zoe is at her friend Madison's house," I said, pulling my robe tighter around me. "Weird, she said I could wait here for her." The girl proceeded to make herself comfortable on my couch, turn on my TV, and raid my refrigerator while we tried to figure out how she'd gotten into the house. That's when she casually mentioned that Zoe had given her a key in case of emergencies. When I confronted Zoe the next day, she acted like I was overreacting. "It's not a big deal. They're trustworthy people. You can't just make copies of my house keys and give them to random people. They're not random people, they're my friends. And what if there was an emergency? What kind of emergency would require your friend to let herself into my house while you're not here?" She couldn't answer that question, but she also didn't seem to understand why I was upset. I ended up having to change the locks, at my own expense, because I had no idea how many unauthorized copies were floating around. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Different friend, different excuse, same violation of my security and privacy. Another lock change, another bill, another argument with Caleb about boundaries and respect. The domestic responsibilities were another constant battle. Despite multiple conversations about helping with household chores, Zoe acted like she was a guest at a bed and breakfast. She wouldn't clean up after herself, wouldn't help with dishes, wouldn't take out trash, wouldn't contribute to the upkeep of the space she was occupying. When I created a chore chart and asked both her and Caleb to participate in maintaining the house, she looked at me like I'd asked her to perform brain surgery. "I'm still in school," she protested. "I don't have time for chores. You have time to go out drinking 3 nights a week, but you don't have time to load a dishwasher? That's different. That's my social life. I need that for my mental health." Meanwhile, I was working full-time, maintaining the house, cooking meals that she refused to eat, and feeling like I was slowly losing my mind. The food situation was particularly frustrating. I've always been someone who likes to meal prep on Sundays, planning out healthy, home-cooked meals for the week. Zoe would see me cooking and ask what I was making, often requesting specific dishes that sounded good to her. I'd accommodate her requests, making extra portions so she could have lunches for school or dinners when she was home. But then she'd reject everything I cooked, claiming it was too healthy, or not what she was in the mood for, or too spicy even when there were no spices involved. Instead, she'd order delivery food almost every night, expensive meals from trendy restaurants that cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget. The untouched food I'd prepared would sit in the refrigerator until it spoiled and I had to throw it away. "Why don't you just stop cooking for her?" Caleb would ask when I complained about the waste. "Because she keeps asking me to make specific things, then doesn't eat them. It's like she's doing it on purpose. She's probably just stressed about graduation and college. Cut her some slack." But it didn't feel like stress. It felt like deliberate disrespect, like she was testing how much she could get away with before I finally snapped. The lack of employment was another issue. Zoe had no job, no income, and no apparent interest in contributing financially to the household she was disrupting. When I suggested she get a part-time job to help with expenses or at least to keep busy, she acted like I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. I need to focus on school, she said. And I'm still figuring out my college plans. Plenty of students work part-time jobs. It teaches responsibility and time management. My parents said I don't need to work until after college. Her parents, who were currently sipping cocktails on a cruise ship while their daughter turned my life upside down, had apparently given her permission to live like a princess for 6 months without any accountability or expectations. By April, I was at my breaking point. The lack of sleep from her late-night arrivals, the constant violations of my privacy and property, the complete disregard for house rules, and the feeling that I'd become a stranger in my own home were taking a serious toll on my mental health and my relationship with Caleb. Every conversation with Caleb about Zoe's behavior ended in an argument. He'd accuse me of being inflexible and unwelcoming, while I'd point out that his sister was being disrespectful and destructive. We'd started sleeping in separate rooms some nights because the tension was so thick it was suffocating. Maybe we should go away for a weekend, Caleb suggested one Thursday night after a particularly heated discussion about Zoe bringing home 3 friends at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. Just the 2 of us. Get some perspective. I jumped at the suggestion. A weekend away sounded like exactly what we needed to reconnect and remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. We booked a cabin in the mountains about 3 hours away, somewhere with no cell service and no distractions, just us and nature and the opportunity to talk through our problems without interruption. We left Friday morning after giving Zoe strict instructions about the house. No parties, no overnight guests, no bringing people over without permission. Keep the doors locked, don't touch anything that didn't belong to her, and text us if there were any emergencies. Got it, she said, not looking up from her phone. Have fun on your old people retreat. The weekend was magical. Without the constant stress of Zoe's presence, Caleb and I remembered how to laugh together, how to have conversations that didn't revolve around his sister's latest transgression. We hiked, cooked meals together, made love like we hadn't in months, and talked about our future. I started to believe that maybe we could work through this rough patch, that once Zoe left for college in a few months, we'd be stronger than ever. We drove home Sunday evening feeling reconnected and optimistic, holding hands and making plans for the week ahead. I was thinking about surprising Caleb with his favorite dinner and maybe even apologizing to Zoe for being so hard on her. Maybe I had been unreasonable. Maybe I could try harder to make this work. Those thoughts evaporated the moment we pulled into my driveway. The first sign that something was wrong was the garbage scattered across my front yard. Cans, bottles, food containers, and things I couldn't immediately identify were strewn everywhere, like someone had taken several trash bags and exploded them across my property. The second sign was the music. Even with the windows closed and the car engine running, we could hear loud music pumping from inside the house. It was nearly 8 p.m. on a Sunday, and my neighbors were probably furious. The third sign was the cars. My driveway, which normally held just Caleb's truck and had space for one other vehicle, was packed with cars. More cars lined the street in front of my house, some parked illegally close to fire hydrants and driveways. What the hell, Caleb muttered, turning off the engine. We sat there for a moment, both of us trying to process what we were seeing. Then the front door opened and a kid who couldn't have been older than 17 stumbled out, carrying a beer and laughing at something someone behind him had said. She threw a party, I said, my voice completely flat. She wouldn't do that. We specifically told her. Another person emerged from the house, this one clearly intoxicated, followed by another, and another. My front porch, which I'd spent hours landscaping and decorating to be a welcoming entrance to my home, was covered with people I'd never seen before, drinking and smoking and treating my property like their personal playground. She threw a party, I repeated, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. We got out of the car and approached the house, stepping over garbage and avoiding groups of strangers who were using my yard as their bathroom. The smell hit us before we reached the front door: alcohol, marijuana, vomit, and something else I couldn't identify but definitely didn't want to. Inside was worse than I could have imagined. My living room, which I'd left clean and organized, looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Furniture was overturned, my coffee table had a crack down the middle, and there were stains on my carpet that might never come out. Red Solo cups were everywhere, many of them still half full and contributing to the puddles of liquid that had soaked into my hardwood floors. The kitchen was destroyed. My counters were covered with empty bottles, food containers, and what looked like the remnants of a drinking game involving my good dishes. Several of my wine glasses were shattered on the floor, and someone had apparently tried to cook something on my stove, leaving it covered with grease and burned food. People were everywhere, most of them obviously underage, all of them intoxicated. They looked at us with the glazed confusion of people too drunk to understand that they were in serious trouble. "Where's Zoe?" Caleb shouted over the music. A girl with smeared makeup pointed toward the back of the house. "I think she's in the bathroom, throwing up." We pushed through the crowd, stepping over more garbage and trying not to look too closely at what people were doing on my furniture. In the hallway, we found a line of people waiting to use the bathroom, and I could hear retching sounds coming from behind the closed door. Caleb pounded on the door. "Zoe, open up." The door opened, and Zoe stumbled out, looking worse than I'd ever seen another human being look. Her hair was matted with something I didn't want to identify, her clothes were stained and torn, and her makeup had run down her face in black streaks. She could barely stand upright. "Caleb," she slurred, throwing her arms around him and nearly knocking them both over. "You're home. This is the best party ever." "What did you do?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. "I invited a few friends over," she giggled, then immediately looked like she might throw up again. "Okay, maybe more than a few friends." I looked around at what had been my beautiful, peaceful home just 3 days ago. There had to be at least 50 people there, probably more. My house wasn't big enough for that many people, and the evidence of overcrowding was everywhere. Someone had broken the banister on my staircase. My downstairs bathroom door was hanging off its hinges. There were holes in the drywall that looked suspiciously like someone had punched them. "Everyone needs to leave," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Right now." "But the party just started," Zoe protested. "It's not even midnight." "It's over," Caleb said firmly. "Everyone out. Now." It took us 2 hours to clear everyone out of the house. 2 hours of arguments, negotiations, and physically escorting intoxicated teenagers to the door while they complained about the party ending early. Some of them had apparently been planning to stay the night, because they'd brought sleeping bags and pillows that they'd scattered throughout my house. When the last person finally left, Caleb, Zoe, and I stood in my destroyed living room, surveying the damage in silence. It was worse than I'd initially thought. In addition to the broken furniture and stained carpets, someone had drawn on my walls with permanent markers. There was vomit in places that would require professional cleaning to address, and my kitchen appliances looked like they'd been used as part of some kind of drinking game. "I'm going to bed," Zoe announced, as if nothing had happened. "You're going to help us clean this up," I said. "I'm too drunk to clean. I'll help tomorrow." She stumbled toward the converted gym room that had become her bedroom, leaving Caleb and me standing in the wreckage of my home. We didn't speak for a long time. We just stood there, taking in the scope of the destruction, the violation, the complete disregard for everything I'd worked so hard to build. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "I'll talk to her tomorrow. She'll help clean up, and she'll pay for any damages." "With what money?" I asked. "She doesn't have a job. My parents will cover it." "Your parents who are currently on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean? They'll handle it when they get back." I walked into my kitchen and started picking up broken glass, not because I had energy to clean but because I needed something to do with my hands to keep from screaming. "This can't happen again," I said. "It won't. I'll make sure of it." But I'd heard those promises before, and they'd never meant anything. Zoe would continue doing whatever she wanted, Caleb would continue making excuses for her, and I would continue feeling like a prisoner in my own home. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day getting estimates for professional cleaning. The carpet cleaning service quoted me $800 just for the main floor. The wall repair would cost at least $500 more. The broken furniture would need to be replaced entirely, and my hardwood floors might need to be refinished where liquids had soaked in and caused permanent damage. When I presented the estimates to Caleb and Zoe that evening, Zoe's response was exactly what I'd expected. "That seems like a lot of money for some cleaning," she said, not looking up from her phone. "There's permanent damage to my house," I explained. "This isn't just about cleaning up some spilled drinks. Houses get damaged. That's what happens when you live in them." I stared at her, wondering if she genuinely didn't understand the magnitude of what she'd done or if she simply didn't care. "When do you think your parents will be back?" I asked Caleb. "Not until August. So I'm supposed to pay thousands of dollars to repair damage your sister caused and just wait 4 months to get reimbursed?" "We'll figure something out," he said, but his tone suggested he had no idea what that something might be. That night, after Zoe had gone to bed and Caleb was in the shower, I sat at my kitchen table and really looked at my life. I was 25 years old, owned my home outright, had a successful career, and had always prided myself on being independent and strong. But for the past 3 months, I'd been living like a guest in my own house, tiptoeing around someone who showed me no respect, constantly fighting with the man I loved, and slowly losing pieces of myself in the name of keeping peace. I pulled out my laptop and started researching my options. Could I legally kick Zoe out since she wasn't on the lease and didn't pay rent? What would happen to my relationship with Caleb if I gave her an ultimatum? How much was I willing to sacrifice to maintain this relationship? The more I researched, the clearer it became that I had been letting myself become a doormat. This was my house, my sanctuary, my investment, and I had every right to decide who could live there and under what conditions. The next day, I had a conversation with Zoe that I should have had months earlier. The party was the final straw, I told her. You've shown complete disrespect for my home, my belongings, and my boundaries. I need you to start looking for somewhere else to live. She looked up from her phone for the first time in weeks, her expression shifting from casual indifference to genuine surprise. You can't kick me out. Caleb said I could stay here. Caleb doesn't own this house. I do. And I'm telling you that you need to find other arrangements. But I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not my problem. You should have thought about that before you destroyed my house. For the first time since she'd moved in, Zoe seemed to understand that there might be consequences for her actions. But instead of apologizing or showing remorse, she went straight to manipulation. Please, she said, her eyes filling with tears that seemed suspiciously convenient. I'm sorry about the party. I know I messed up. But I'll be homeless if you kick me out. You won't be homeless. You'll figure something out, just like millions of other 18-year-olds do. But I'm still in school. And I'm supposed to start college in the fall. And you can do both of those things from somewhere else. That evening, Caleb confronted me about the conversation. You can't just kick her out without talking to me first, he said, his voice angrier than I'd ever heard it. I can absolutely make decisions about who lives in my house, I replied, matching his tone. She's family. She's not my family. And she's shown nothing but disrespect for my family, which includes you and me and our dogs and our home. Where is she supposed to go? That's not my responsibility to figure out. So you're just going to make her homeless? I'm going to stop enabling someone who has shown me nothing but disrespect and disregard. The argument escalated from there, with Caleb accusing me of being heartless and unwelcoming, and me pointing out that his sister had violated every reasonable boundary and expectation for living in someone else's home. If you kick her out, he said finally, I don't know if I can stay with someone who would do that to my family. Then maybe you should think about whether you want to be with someone who would let your family walk all over her, I replied. We didn't speak for 2 days after that. Caleb slept on the couch, Zoe avoided me entirely, and I started to feel like I was living with hostile strangers rather than people I cared about. But I'd made my decision, and I wasn't backing down. On Thursday, I did something I should have done months earlier. I called Caleb's parents directly. I'd gotten their number from Caleb's phone while he was in the shower, and I'd been debating whether to use it for weeks. But after the party and the ultimatum and the realization that this situation was destroying my relationship and my mental health, I decided it was time for some honest communication. The call connected through some kind of ship-to-shore service, and Linda answered on the third ring. Mia, she said, sounding surprised. Is everything okay? Is Caleb all right? Caleb's fine, I said. But we need to talk about Zoe. There was a pause, then Linda's voice became more cautious. What about Zoe? I took a deep breath and launched into the whole story. The late-night arrivals, the stolen belongings, the destroyed gym, the unauthorized key copies, the refusal to help with household responsibilities, the expensive delivery food orders, and finally, the party that had caused thousands of dollars in damage to my home. Linda listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of concern or disapproval. When I finished, there was a long silence. I had no idea, she said finally. Zoe calls us every week and tells us everything is going well. Everything is not going well, I said. And I need to know what the plan is for her living situation going forward, because this arrangement isn't working. Of course, Linda said quickly. We'll figure something out. Maybe she can stay with Robert's sister in Phoenix. There's something else, I said, dreading this part of the conversation. You mentioned that you're sending money to cover her expenses while she stays with us. Yes, we send £700 every month to help with groceries and utilities and anything else she might need. My heart stopped. £700? Is that not enough? We can increase it if. I've never received any money, I interrupted. Not a penny. The silence on Linda's end was deafening. What do you mean? She asked finally. I mean no one has given me any money to help cover Zoe's expenses. Not Zoe, not Caleb, not anyone. But we've been sending it every month since February. £700, transferred directly to. She trailed off, and I could hear her talking to someone else, presumably Robert, in the background. There was some muffled conversation, then she came back on the line. "We've been sending the money to Caleb's account," she said, her voice tight with what sounded like growing anger. "He said it would be easier that way, and that he'd handle giving it to you." The phone felt heavy in my hand. 700 British pounds was roughly 850 American dollars. Every month. Since February. That was over $4,000 that should have been helping offset the cost of feeding, housing, and dealing with Zoe's impact on my life. Money that Caleb had been receiving and keeping without ever mentioning it to me. "Are you still there?" Linda asked. "I'm here," I managed to say. "This is unacceptable," she said, and I could hear the fury building in her voice. "We specifically sent that money to help cover the costs of Zoe staying with you. If Caleb has been keeping it." "I need to go," I said quickly. "But Linda, I need you to know that Zoe can't continue staying here. The party caused thousands of dollars in damage to my house, and her behavior has been completely unacceptable." "I understand completely," Linda said. "We'll arrange for her to stay somewhere else immediately. And Mia, we'll also transfer the money that should have gone to you directly. All of it. This is absolutely unacceptable." When I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking. Not from nerves, but from rage. Pure, white-hot rage that I'd never felt before in my life. Caleb had been receiving over $800 a month, money specifically intended to help with his sister's expenses, and had kept every penny while watching me struggle to afford the additional groceries, utilities, and now the damage repairs. He'd sat there during every argument about money, every conversation about Zoe's impact on our household budget, knowing that his parents were sending money to help and choosing not to mention it. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was significant. It was about the lying, the manipulation, the willingness to let me feel like I was being unreasonable for expecting help with expenses when help had been available all along. I sat at my kitchen table for about an hour, just processing what I'd learned. Then I heard Caleb's truck in the driveway. He came through the front door whistling, apparently in a good mood, carrying takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. "Peace offering," he said, holding up the bag. "I got your usual." I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 3 years, this man I'd opened my home to, this man I'd been planning a future with, and felt like I was seeing a stranger. "We need to talk," I said. Something in my tone must have warned him, because his expression shifted immediately from cheerful to cautious. "Okay," he said slowly, setting the food down on the counter. "What about?" "I just got off the phone with your mother." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. "Mia, I can explain, $850, I said, my voice deadly calm. "Every month since February. Money your parents have been sending specifically to help cover Zoe's expenses while she stays in my house." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. "I was going to tell you, when?" I interrupted. "When were you going to tell me? After your sister moved out? After we broke up?" "Never. It's not what you think, it's exactly what I think. You've been stealing money that was meant to help with your sister's expenses while watching me stress about the financial impact of having her here." "I wasn't stealing," he said, his voice getting defensive. "My parents sent it to me. It's my money. It's money they sent specifically to help cover the costs of Zoe living here. Money that should have been helping with groceries, utilities, and the damage she's caused to my house. I was saving it," he said quickly. "For us. For our future. You were saving it without telling me it existed while I was spending my own money to support your sister? I wanted to surprise you with it later. Maybe for a vacation or a ring or something." I stared at him, amazed at his ability to lie even when caught red-handed. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't make this worse by lying to me. I'm not lying. If you were saving it for us, it would be in a joint account or you would have told me about it. You kept it secret because you knew it was wrong." Caleb sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, finally abandoning his attempts at justification. "The money isn't even the biggest problem," I continued. "The biggest problem is that you've been lying to me for months while watching me struggle with a situation you created." "I didn't create this situation. My parents asked us to help, your parents asked you to help, and you volunteered my house without asking me. Then when problems arose, you took their money without telling me and let me believe I was being unreasonable for expecting financial help." We sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear Zoe moving around in the converted gym room, probably getting ready to go out for another night of drinking and chaos. "What do you want me to do?" Caleb asked finally. "I want you to be honest with me. How much money have you received from your parents?" "About $4,000. "Where is it?" "In my savings account." "All of it?" He hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. "Most of it." "How much have you spent?" "Maybe $1,000. "On what?" Another hesitation. Stuff for me. Some new tools, a weekend trip with my buddies, just stuff. I felt like I might throw up. He'd spent money that was meant to help with his sister's expenses on himself while I was buying groceries for her, paying increased utility bills, and now facing thousands in damage repairs. Your mother is transferring the full amount to me tomorrow, I said. All $4,200. She can't do that. It's my money. It was never your money. It was money meant to help with expenses you created in my house. So what, you're just going to keep it? I'm going to use it for exactly what it was intended for, covering the costs of your sister's stay here, including the damage from her party. That's when Zoe chose to make her appearance, bouncing into the kitchen dressed for another night out. What's all the yelling about? She asked cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. Your brother has been keeping the money your parents sent to help with your expenses, I said bluntly. Zoe looked confused. What money? Your parents have been sending $850 a month to help cover the cost of you living here. Caleb never mentioned it. Zoe's eyes widened, then narrowed as she looked at her brother. You told me Mia was just being generous and letting me stay here for free. It was complicated, Caleb started. You've been taking money that was supposed to make this easier for Mia? Zoe asked, and for the first time since she'd moved in, she sounded genuinely upset about something that wasn't directly affecting her. I was handling it, Caleb said weakly. By handling it, you mean keeping it, I said. Zoe looked back and forth between us, and I could see her starting to understand the bigger picture. Is that why you've been so upset about everything? She asked me. Because you thought you were covering all my expenses yourself? That's part of it, I said. But mostly I've been upset because you've shown no respect for my home, my belongings, or my boundaries. But if there was money to help, there was money to help, I said firmly. Your brother just decided to keep it instead of using it for its intended purpose. For the first time since she'd moved in, Zoe looked ashamed. Not defensive, not indignant, but genuinely ashamed. I didn't know, she said quietly. I thought you were just being nice. I was being nice, I said. But nice has limits, and you've exceeded every single one of them. Zoe nodded slowly, then looked at her brother with an expression I'd never seen from her before, disappointment. That's really messed up, Caleb, she said. Mom and Dad sent that money specifically to help Mia, and you just kept it? You don't understand the situation, Caleb began. I understand that you lied, Zoe interrupted. To me, to Mia, to Mom and Dad. That's really messed up. She turned to me, and for the first time in months, made direct eye contact. I'm sorry, she said, and it sounded genuine. I didn't know about the money, but that doesn't excuse how I've been acting. I've been terrible to you, and you've been nothing but generous. I was so shocked by the apology that I didn't know how to respond. I talked to Mom today, I said finally. She's arranging for you to stay with your aunt in Phoenix until they get back from their trip. Good, Zoe said, surprising me again. I think that's probably best for everyone. She looked at Caleb again, shaking her head. I can't believe you did this. She's been paying for everything while you kept the money Mom and Dad sent to help. With that, she left the kitchen, leaving Caleb and me alone again. Even your sister thinks what you did was wrong, I said. She's 18. She doesn't understand complicated financial situations. There's nothing complicated about this. You lied and kept money that wasn't meant for you. I'm sorry, he said, but it sounded hollow and defensive rather than genuine. I'll transfer the money to you tomorrow. Your mother already said she'd handle that. So what happens now? I looked at this man I'd loved, this man I'd planned a future with, this man who had just revealed a side of himself I'd never seen before, and realized I didn't know him at all. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to think. Think about what? About whether I can trust you. About whether this relationship is worth salvaging. About whether the person I fell in love with is real or just someone you pretended to be. Caleb's face went pale. You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 3 years over a misunderstanding about money? This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern of dishonesty and disrespect that I'm just now seeing clearly. I made a mistake, you made a choice. Multiple choices. Every month when you received that money and decided not to tell me, every time I complained about expenses and you stayed silent, every time I questioned whether I was being reasonable and you let me doubt myself instead of being honest, those were all choices. Everyone makes mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Caleb. Mistakes are accidental. This was deliberate deception. I stood up from the table, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and the day and the entire situation. I'm going to bed, I said. We can talk more tomorrow, but right now I need space to process everything. Mia, please, tomorrow, I said firmly, and walked away. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment of doubt from the past few months. How many times had I questioned my own reactions? How many times had I wondered if I was being too harsh, too inflexible, too unwelcoming? How many times had Caleb let me believe I was the problem while knowing he was keeping money that could have solved most of our financial concerns? The worst part wasn't even the money, though $4,000 was significant. The worst part was the realization that the man I'd loved and trusted had been comfortable watching me struggle, stress, and doubt myself while withholding information that could have changed everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Zoe packing. She was moving around quietly, not her usual stomping and door slamming, and when I went to the kitchen for coffee, I found a note on the counter. "Mia," it read, "I'm really sorry for everything. I know I was a terrible houseguest and I took advantage of your kindness. I'm going to stay with Madison until my aunt can pick me up next week. I'll pay you back for the party damage somehow, even if it takes me years. Thank you for trying to help me even when I didn't deserve it. Zoe." For the first time in months, I was surprised by something Zoe had done in a good way. The note showed more maturity and self-awareness than she demonstrated since moving in. Caleb emerged from the guest room where he'd slept, looking haggard and defeated. "She's gone," he said. I saw the note. She said she couldn't stay here knowing what I'd done. We stood in the kitchen in awkward silence, the elephant in the room being the question of what would happen to us. "My mom transferred the money this morning," he said finally. "All of it." I checked my phone and saw the notification from my bank. $4,200, deposited at 6 a.m. "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was thanking him or his mother. "So what now?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I keep trying to understand how you could lie to me for months while watching me stress about money and your sister's behavior. I wasn't trying to hurt you, but you did hurt me. Whether you intended to or not, you hurt me deeply." "I was scared," he said suddenly. "Scared that if you knew there was money available, you'd be even more upset about Zoe's behavior because you'd feel like she should be grateful. So you decided it was better to let me think I was supporting her entirely myself? I thought if I kept the money aside, I could use it to make everything better later. Pay for the damages, take you on a nice vacation, maybe even put it toward an engagement ring." "An engagement ring?" I stared at him. "You thought the appropriate response to lying about money was to buy me a ring with the money you lied about? I thought it would be romantic, it would have been criminal. That money wasn't yours to spend on anything other than Zoe's expenses." We went around in circles for the next hour, with Caleb trying to justify his choices and me trying to understand how someone I'd trusted completely could have deceived me so thoroughly. Finally, I said the words that had been building in my mind since the phone call with his mother. "I think you should move out." Caleb's face crumpled. "You can't mean that." "I do mean it. I can't be with someone I don't trust, and I don't trust you anymore. It was one mistake, it was months of lies. It was watching me struggle and choosing to let me struggle rather than be honest. It was putting your sister's comfort above my well-being in my own home." "I love you," he said desperately. "I love you too," I replied, and meant it. But love isn't enough when trust is gone. We can rebuild trust, maybe we can, but not while living together. Not while everything reminds me of the lies and the manipulation. "So that's it? 3 years together and you're just throwing it away?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm protecting myself from further harm." Caleb left that afternoon, packing his belongings in silence while I sat in the backyard with Buster and Luna, trying to process the end of my relationship and the end of the most stressful period of my life. When he was done packing, he found me outside. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time, it sounded genuine. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I just hope someday you can forgive me." "I hope so too," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean going back to the way things were." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. The house felt strange that first night. Quiet in a way it hadn't been in months, but also empty. I kept expecting to hear Zoe's music or Caleb's voice, but there was just silence and the sound of my dogs settling into their beds. Over the next few weeks, I used the money Linda had transferred to repair the damage from Zoe's party. The carpets were professionally cleaned, the walls were repaired and repainted, and I slowly began to reclaim my space. I moved the gym equipment back into the converted bedroom, transforming it once again into the workout space Caleb and I had created together. I also started therapy, because I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd lost touch with my own instincts and boundaries. The woman who had bought a house on her own at 24, who had built a successful career and maintained strong friendships, had somehow allowed herself to become a doormat in her own home. My therapist helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just about money or house guests, but about patterns of manipulation and control that I'd been too close to see clearly. She helped me recognize that a healthy relationship involves mutual respect, honest communication, and shared decision-making about things that affect both partners. 3 months later, I got a text from Zoe. She was settled in Arizona with her aunt, had gotten a part-time job, and was planning to start community college in the fall. She apologized again for her behavior and thanked me for the wake-up call about accountability and respect. "I know I was awful," she wrote. "But living with my aunt has taught me what it means to be a respectful house guest. I'm working to pay her rent, I do chores without being asked, and I'm learning to cook instead of ordering takeout every night. I should have done that for you." I wrote back, telling her I was proud of her growth and wishing her well in college. I never heard from Caleb directly, but through mutual friends, I learned that he'd moved back in with a buddy from work and was telling people that I'd kicked him out over money. The fact that he was still framing the situation that way, still not taking responsibility for the lies and manipulation, confirmed that I'd made the right decision. 6 months after he moved out, I was finally ready to start dating again. Not because I was lonely or desperate for companionship, but because I'd rediscovered who I was when I wasn't constantly managing other people's drama and dysfunction. I'd learned to trust my instincts again, to set boundaries without feeling guilty, and to recognize the difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. The house felt like mine again, peaceful, organized, and full of the positive energy that had attracted me to it in the first place. Buster and Luna were happier too, no longer stressed by constant disruptions and strangers in their space. Looking back, I can see that the situation with Zoe and the money was just the catalyst that revealed deeper problems in my relationship with Caleb. The lying, the disrespect, the willingness to let me doubt myself rather than be honest, those were character flaws that would have surfaced eventually, probably in even more damaging ways. The hardest part wasn't losing Caleb, though that was painful. The hardest part was realizing how much of myself I'd lost in trying to keep peace in a situation that was inherently unworkable. I'd become someone who second-guessed her own reactions, who accepted unacceptable behavior, who prioritized other people's comfort over her own well-being. But I found myself again. I remembered that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, that being generous doesn't mean being taken advantage of, and that being in love doesn't mean accepting lies and manipulation. Today, I'm in a relationship with someone who respects my boundaries, communicates honestly about difficult topics, and would never make major decisions affecting our shared life without consulting me first. When his family visits, they stay in hotels and treat my home with respect. When we disagree about something, we talk it through rather than one person bulldozing the other. Most importantly, I trust him. Not because he's perfect, but because he's consistently honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. The woman who asked, "Would I be the asshole if I kicked my boyfriend's sister out of our house?" was asking the wrong question. The real question was, why am I allowing people to treat me so poorly in my own home? The answer to that question changed my life. Sometimes the people we love will test our boundaries, manipulate our generosity, and take advantage of our kindness. But we get to decide how much we'll tolerate, and we get to change course when we realize we've accepted the unacceptable. I'm not the asshole for standing up for myself. I'm not the asshole for demanding honesty and respect. And I'm definitely not the asshole for choosing my own well-being over keeping peace with people who were determined to take advantage of me. My mother always told me that people will treat you exactly how you allow them to treat you. For months, I allowed Caleb and Zoe to treat me like a doormat, a bank account, and a hotel staff member in my own home. But I learned something important through that experience. It's never too late to remember who you are and what you deserve. It's never too late to set boundaries, demand respect, and choose yourself over people who would rather take advantage of you than appreciate you. The house is quiet now, but it's the good kind of quiet. The kind that comes from peace rather than avoidance, from contentment rather than walking on eggshells. Buster and Luna can play in the backyard without being awakened by drunk teenagers at 3 a.m. I can work out in my own gym without having to navigate around someone else's mess. I can cook meals that I actually want to eat without having them rejected for expensive delivery alternatives. And most importantly, I can look at myself in the mirror and respect the woman looking back at me. She's someone who learned to value herself enough to demand better treatment. She's someone who chose truth over convenience, boundaries over false peace, and self-respect over maintaining relationships that had become toxic. If you're reading this and wondering whether you're being too harsh, too demanding, or too inflexible in your own relationships, ask yourself this: are you being treated with the same respect you show others? Are the people in your life contributing to your well-being or detracting from it? Are you making excuses for behavior you'd never accept from strangers? You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve to feel comfortable and safe in your own home. And you're not the asshole for demanding those basic standards from the people who claim to love you. Sometimes being kind to yourself means being firm with others. Sometimes protecting your peace means ending relationships that have become harmful. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that's destructive to everyone involved. I don't regret opening my home to Zoe when she needed help. But I'll never again open my home to someone without clear boundaries, honest communication, and mutual respect. And I'll never again stay in a relationship with someone who thinks lying and manipulation are acceptable ways to handle difficult situations. The woman I am now would never have tolerated what the woman I was put up with for months. But becoming her required going through the experience, learning the lessons, and choosing to value myself enough to demand better. That's not being an asshole. That's being smart.